Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I hope you're wearing your red. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We'll be starting shortly. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone on the yes. 30 seconds coming on camera to just wish everyone happy Val's Day. Let me start sharing and we'll go right in. Okay, once again, you're welcome to today's webinar, and today we will be talking about a very interesting topic. The feedback, the questions that we have received in the past couple of weeks since we put out the topic has also been very exciting to us, and we trust that the Lord will do great things through today's webinar. My name, once again, is Ladi Stephen. On behalf of the entire Breed team, I welcome you. And in Breed, we believe that marriage should be enjoyed and not endured. And all those things that make people make us to endure our marriage, we trust God, and we're here together believing that we will continue to receive practical insights on how to turn our marriages and our relationships, our lives into joy. Today, we shall be talking about depression. If the admin can help me put up the first poll. Please feel free to tell us your name, put your name and where you're joining us from in the chat so that we'll know ourselves. And if you can see your screen, the first poll is up. And don't worry, nobody can see who is putting up what. So how much do you know about depression? So choose one and let's see where our audience is at with this topic. We'll just wait 30 seconds and then we can continue. We'll take down the poll soon. Make sure you have voted and submitted. Okay. Can we see? Oh, more volume. Thank you. Please let me know if it is better. Can you hear me better? Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see the outcomes of our poll. Okay, so 50% say, I know so much about it, fantastic. And the next 50% say, we know a bit. Okay, so those 50% who know so much are going to help us make it an interactive session today. Okay, so put in the chat what you know depression to be. What is depression? Let's put in the chat what we know depression to be. Please, if you have questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and as we go along, we will take questions at the end. Yeah. Okay. I'm not seeing people put what depression is. So we're just going to go. Depression is the extreme feeling of sadness. Yes, an extreme feeling, extreme. Yes, thank you, Rukaya. Yeah. It's not just feeling sadness, an extreme feeling of sadness. Okay, while others are putting their thoughts on depression, we will continue. Okay, so this evening we will quickly look through what we already have started talking through. What is depression? What are the common misconceptions that there are about depression? What are facts about depression? What causes depression? What's the impact of depression, particularly focusing on the marriage and family dynamics? And how can we practically walk out of depression? Is it even possible to walk out of depression? And then we'll just take a look at what does God have anything to say as well on depression. So like somebody said, like Rukaya just helped us to put in the chat, depression is a common and persistent mood. Somebody's writing on my screen, please. Is a persistent mood disorder or an illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. So depression has an impact on your feelings, on your thoughts, and on your behavior. It is not just a feeling. It affects the way you feel, it affects the way you think, and it affects how you will act. Depression has commonly been defined as the common cold, just like you easily get, how we say in this part of the world, kata, you get cold easily. It's the common cold of mental health. And what that means is that it's very common. It's even more common than we think. Yeah. And depression can significantly impact our ability to function, our ability to think, our ability to act properly, whether at home, at work. It can impact on our overall well-being. So, question. I think our next poll should come up before we go to this. Yes. So, have you ever had an episode of depression? So, yes, I have ever had. No, I've never had. Okay, we can take down our poll. Let's see. Yes, so everybody, 100% of people on the call have had an episode of depression. Okay, so it's not a stranger. We're very familiar with what we're talking about. Okay. So there are some, common misconceptions that we have about depression. Like, I really like what Rukaya puts when she was describing what depression is. It is not just sadness. You commonly hear when somebody's having a bad day, says, I'm depressed. Just something happened, and in a few minutes, you're like, oh, what's wrong with you? It's like, I'm depressed. No, you're not depressed. It's not temporary sadness. It is not temporary sadness. Like she said, it's an intense and long-lasting feeling of sadness. It is a sadness, like clinically, that has lasted above 2 weeks consistently and is intense and it is prolonged. Another myth that we hear about depression is it's a sign of weakness. Only weak people can get depressed, or people who don't have faith. No, it is not a sign of weakness. It is a medical condition that can affect anybody, regardless of your age, regardless of your social status in the society. Depression can affect anyone. Another myth that we hear is you're not trying hard enough. You're just maybe lazy. You can come out of this thing. You don't have to keep feeling the way that you're feeling. You don't have to stay where you are. But it's not all about willpower. Depression involves complex activities that happen in the brain that can change the way that you think, that can change the way that you behave, that can change the way that you feel. So it's not all about willpower. We also hear things like it is the situation that we're going through is situational. It's not always situational. It's not always, for instance, somebody is broke and then he says, oh, because I'm broke, if I just get the money now, I'll not be depressed anymore. That's not depression. Yes, it can be a trigger for depression, but it's not necessarily a situation. It's not necessarily a situation that is immediate that leads to depression. It doesn't only depend on external situations. And there are another thing that is a common misconception about depression is that it can quickly be fixed. Because depression can get very deeply rooted, sometimes it takes a process, and that process may be long, depending on who you are, depending on what stage this depression is. It is not always a quick fix. And that's why sometimes people get frustrated, because you're wanting something to change the very next minute and you still find yourself in it. And another misconception is that when somebody is depressed, you can always know. No, you cannot always know when somebody is depressed. There are people who look happy, but they are depressed. There are people who are the life of the party, but they are depressed. That's why sometimes you see people cannot relate how people look so happy and the next minute they commit suicide, because it's not always carried on the face. People can mask depression. We can also put in the chat what other misconceptions that we know people have about depression. Let me see if people are already putting in the chat. Yes, it is a mental disorder, a persistent feeling of sadness. Persistent, yes. Any other misconceptions? Another misconception is it doesn't happen to children. Yes, rich people. It's true. Rich people are not depressed. It's such a misconception. Irrespective of your socioeconomic status in the society, depression can affect you. Okay. Please feel free to put other misconceptions that you know in the chat. Some scary but true facts about depression. 1, depression can create a new normal for you. You know, people have been under depression for such a long time. Remember when we were describing depression, we said it is a mental disorder that is persistent, right? And can affect the way you think, the way you act, and the way you think, the way you act, and the way you feel. After a while of being in a state of depression, it can deceive the person who is going through the depression to think that this is who he is, who he or she is. So it can create a new normal for you. That normal that now you have accepted, because your body and the brain of a human being, right, will after a while go into it will develop coping mechanisms because of the constant state that the person has been in the course of the depression. And over a while, over time, you begin to accept that, oh, maybe this is who I am really, right? But it's a new normal that depression has created for that person. Another scary but true fact about depression is that depression can change your brain. It can physically reduce the size of your brain. It can impact on the structure and the functionality of your brain. One of the ways that depression does this, because remember, as we will see later, depression involves the release of neurotransmitters in the brain and in parts of our body, right? These do not leave the body without an impact. And also inflammation that happen in the brain when depression becomes prolonged can literally shrink the size of a person's brain. So when we're talking about depression, it's not just that, okay, you are just in a state of sadness. Some things are happening in the body of the person as the depression continues to persist. Another fact is there is also a strong connection between the health of your gut and depression. So what you eat matters. Like what I eat, does it matter in depression? Yes, it does matter in depression, as we will see just down the line. And one of the things that young new mothers suffer in Africa, and sometimes not just new mother, is postpartum depression. It is real, and up to 15% of new moms experience this. And it's not just the mom blues, it is actual depression. I always just refer to this experience of one of my colleagues, my former colleagues who had a baby. She was like the sweetest. She was such an amiable colleague before she had a baby. And after she came back from mat leave, she was very edgy. And one of the days I was having a conversation with her, I was like, you are so different. And she was like, she was living under such guilt because when she had the baby, she fell into depression, and it was not, the people around her did not quickly notice this, until she got to the point where she was about killing the baby, and she could never forgive. It was so hard for her to just imagine that she could have killed her baby by herself. She may not have killed the baby, but how depressed she was. After having the baby, she tried to harm the baby, so they had to keep the baby away from her for a while. These things are real. And, another scary fact about depression is that suicide rates are significantly higher when there is depression. And it is significantly so across the world, irrespective of race, irrespective of socioeconomic status. Depression is a killer. So it's a war when it comes to depression. So let's see some statistics on depression. Across the world, over 280 million people have depression. This is a WHO statistic, and that's a huge number. That translates to 1 in 4 people experiencing depression in their lifetime. Remember when we did the earlier poll, 100% of us in this call have had an episode of depression. The World Health Organization also says that identified depression as the #1 disability in the world. So depression is more dangerous than that heart disease. It's more dangerous than cancer because there is lost productivity, people die, people move into acquiring other predisposing and comorbid diseases as well when there is depression. Oh, we were supposed to do our next poll before we got here. Can we still quickly do it? Sorry. So Who are more prone to depression, men or women? We'll take the next 30 seconds to do that, and then is it the men? Is it the women? Sorry. Right. Sorry. My slide jumped back. Okay. Okay. So can we project? Yes. So 56% of us say women, and the rest of us think it's men. Okay. The statistics show that the women have depression twice as high as men. However, the suicide rates in men who have depression is higher than in women. So men carry out their threats of suicide more than the women. So even though depression rates are higher in women, among people who have depression, the suicide rates are higher in men. And depression, between the age of 15 to 25, many people have already had an episode of depression. In Africa, I always say that the data is not as fantastic. So even this data that we have for other parts of the world, we don't really exactly know what the data says for Africa. So, but the good thing is that there is up to 60% success when you make an effort to treat depression. Even though there's a 60% treatment success, there is still a 75% gap in treatment. People who do not receive adequate care for depression is still high. And like we said, the risk of suicide in depression is 10 times higher when there is depression than when there is no depression. So, for those who said they have experienced depression, what were some, sorry, my slides are going, so they're not allowing us to do. Please feel free to put in the chat some of the symptoms that make you feel that you had depression, what you experienced that made you feel, I had depression. One, what we said earlier from all the definitions that the descriptors that people put in the chat, persistent sadness that lasts for weeks and it goes for months. For some people, it goes for years. You are depressed. When you lose interest in the things that you used to enjoy, the person used to enjoy watching football, hanging out with friends, going to church, but then suddenly those things no longer bring you joy. And not only do they not bring you joy, you begin to withdraw from those things that you used to enjoy and from people, when your sleep begins to be significantly impacted, you begin to experience restless sleep, inability to sleep, and you can't explain, and it's persistent. Remember, the word persistent is very, very important. It's not once in a while, it is continuous. These symptoms that you see here will continue to persist. And then you just continually feel tired, you feel drained, you don't have the motivation to do anything, you don't have energy to do your daily task. Those are signs of depression. When you begin to have difficulty focusing, remembering things, thinking clearly, remember we said depression, it will affect the way you think, the way you act, and the way you feel. So when these things begin to become persistent, you're thinking, you were sharp-headed. Now you just can't remember, you just can't understand why you cannot remember things, you can't focus, and then feelings of worthlessness, like, why am I here? Negative self-perception, you begin to, feel deep guilt and blame yourself for everything, even when you're not to blame, and then you stay in that place. Remember, we said it is a mood disorder. So when that downward mood comes, it just stays and persists. Then there's changes in your appetite. And the changes in appetite is very interesting, because for some people, it's an increased appetite. They eat more than normal. And for some, they just don't eat at all. Because one of the misconceptions is to think that when somebody is depressed, then the person doesn't feel like eating. It's not all the time. For some people, their appetite is even increased, and then they begin to add weight excessively. And again, like we said earlier, thoughts of suicide. I don't want to wake up and be here. Those are the kind of things you hear, like, I'm better off not being here. Everybody's better off not having me here, And if you look at the picture that we have, you see a ship on the sea, and it's coming towards an iceberg. It's like depression. In depression, many times the symptoms, the signs that we see are just like a tip of the iceberg. In one meeting that I was this week, and somebody was saying it's very sad, because the people who are close to people that are about committing suicide, many times those who are close to them, they never pick it up. Even those who are in the same room space with them, they don't pick it up, because it's like the iceberg. What you can see is just very tiny compared to what is happening inside the person. And when the ship hits the rock, the entire ship is wrecked, like the Titanic. So how many people have experienced this in the times that we mentioned that we experienced depression? If this was your experience, please feel free to put how many of the symptoms that you experienced in when you had that episode that you mentioned of depression. Because depression affects the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we act, it is important to know that the whole person is affected when depression comes into play. It's not just a thing of the mind. Some people feel extreme pain, physical pain, as the depression progresses. The extreme tiredness, exhaustion, that now you're not able to physically be okay. And as it persists, because it begins to impact other body functions, you also begin to have some physical illnesses as well. It predisposes you to other physical illnesses like heart conditions and all the others. So depression affects the total being, the total person, your mind, your body, and spirit, because you begin to question, like, who am I? Why am I here? You begin to ask like existential questions. So just pulling from that slide again, just knowing, like, what are the root causes? If it affects affecting the way that we think, the way that we act, and the way that we feel, where does depression comes from? Where does it come from? For the purpose of the discussion today, we'll just limit them to 6 areas where depression can come from. I would just like to say that there's still a lot that is not known about depression. So whatever we know about depression is just the information, and the experiences, the body of knowledge that is available. There's still so much research that is going on for depression. So one, there are biological factors that can predispose person to depression. One is genetics. Um, you have somebody who is prone to depression in your family, because remember, it has to do with brain functions, right? Your brain chemistry. And that can, if, as I said earlier, it has the capacity to impact and change some of the function and the structure of your brain. So if somebody had depression, like a genetic predisposition to depression, can pass it across. Hormonal imbalances, across different phases of our lives. We will not, given the time, we will not spend so much time here. There are medical conditions that can also predispose us to depression, like vitamin D deficiencies, for instance, level of the thyroid gland, the thyroxine in a person's body, and certain illnesses that a person can go through, very stressful experiences. Also, psychological factors can predispose us. How do you think? What what kind of belief systems? What forms your belief systems? And for depression, this is in my own personal experience. This is one area that I have seen like a lot of people are trapped by when they face depression. Like your your thought patterns, your beliefs, your core beliefs are very, very important where depression is concerned. And then lifestyle factors, the food that we eat, how we take care of ourselves, and of course now technology. I had mentioned earlier when we're talking about the scary facts that there is a strong connection between our gut and depression. For instance, um, one of the key neurotransmitters and hormones, if you want to call it, that is implicated in depression is dopamine. And dopamine, up to 90% of the dopamine in your body that goes to your brain, is manufactured in the gut, right? But there are certain um, food, there are certain habits that we have, like smoking, that can destroy the bacterial flora and can affect the level of dopamine that is produced. And with the dopamine not being sufficiently produced, we don't have enough. And the less dopamine you have, the more prone you become to depression. And another thing in lifestyle that I just like to highlight is technology. You know, with social media, we just like, even with work everywhere, you don't just stop working anymore, right? There's technology everywhere. When you close from work, then there's social media, and particularly also for children, we are on the screen for so long. And apart from the fact that social media provides an opportunity for people to show an aspect of their life, it's just a one point aspect of a person's life that is showing on social media that has the potential to make another person feel less. And the more you go there to seek maybe validation, to seek whatever, after a while, that stimulation does not continue. Apart from that exposure to the things that are happening on social media, the use of the blue rays that come from the technology also causes stimulation in our brain. And the more the stimulation, what it does to the brain is to continue to ask for more. That's why we get addicted to social media. That's why we get addicted, because after a while, your brain wants to continue to have that stimulation. And the more your brain gets, the level of stimulation to your brain, you cannot sustain it can't be sustained. And after a while, you're not able to meet up with that level, the way that your brain is requesting it, and you fall into depression. Other factors like social dynamics, like critical relationships in our lives, our support systems, um, one of the statistics for depression that is not on that slide is over 80% of the cases of depression are related to relationships. They are related, and that's why we also chose to do this on today. Like, what better day to talk about depression than Valentine's Day, where people are, celebrating. I was on my way from work today. I was so stuck in traffic because there was so much activity going on for Valentine and the roads were blocked. But it's those same relationships that bring people so much joy, that bring people so much pain. So other factors, also environmental pressures, stressful events that we have in our lives. I think it was one of the sessions where I was sharing one of the experiences of one of my aunts who had a very stressful experience in marriage. And she was, though, a young person. And when she went through the experience, some weeks later, every single hair on her hair turned gray, just because of the level of stress that she faced. Also, seasonal changes, right? That's why sometimes people in like really high, like very cold areas, they are very prone to depression. Remember, we mentioned when we're talking about uh, how your nutrition can affect, can be implicated in in depression, and also medical conditions like low vitamin D deficiencies um, can can also trigger depression. Some people have like seasonal affective depression. So once the cycle comes, they face it. And then societal pressures, and not also discountenancing the spiritual dimensions of of depression, like our core beliefs about who God is to us. Like my pastor was saying this week, like on your understanding of the love of God can determine how you relate with yourself and with God, and it can put you in a state of depression, and also not discountenancing that there can also be demonic influences in depression. So all these factors build upon each other. Sometimes it's not only one singular factor in depression, but they work hand in hand to lead to depression. We are keeping. I was talking earlier about the negative thoughts, your core beliefs, and how it is implicated in depression. When somebody has depression, like I said, in my own personal experience, one of the things that I've seen people do, and it is a core thing that happens in depression, is there is some distortion in your cognition. You just have like extremes in your thoughts, and these extremes are usually tilted towards the negative. So you're either catastrophizing, you're seeing that everything that is happening is bad, or you're seeing like you are the reason for every bad thing, or you're overgeneralizing, or you're doing like selective abstraction of your experiences, of your thoughts. What is happening to you, you exaggerate the negative aspect of it. You just focus on the negative. You don't see like any of the good things that are happening, but just focusing. It's a function that is happening in the person's brain. Remember that we said it begins to impact how you think. And when you think, it's a mood disorder. So it keeps you in one side of on one point of the spectrum, right, of your thinking. Like, so you're just constantly in that portion where it's negative. So some of the self-talk of a person who is going through depression: I have made a mistake that can never be reversed. I'm so unlovable. I'm a mistake. I'm a failure. I'm a disappointment. I can never be forgiven. I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here. I'm better off dead. I'm not good enough for anything. I'm a burden to anyone. I'm so insignificant. Every negative thing that you can think about, something may just happen, and you know the the person just lives consistently in an arena of thinking traps, trapping himself. For the marriage and family dynamics, what are some of the things that trigger depression? We are very conversant with this, based on what we put earlier in the chat. Emotional wounds and trauma that people go through and are not able to come out from. Negative self-talk, fertility issues keep people, miscarriages, menopause, inability to have children. We talked about pregnancy, toxic environments and relationships, unresolved past hurts, that people carry around. And remember that when the person gets into depression, these negative feelings become exaggerated. That's the place the person will stay. Guilt, shame, secrets that you did not divulge and you kept keeping to yourself. After a while, it festers, and the more that person keeps holding on to that secret, keeps slipping deeper and deeper into depression. Emotional exhaustion from communication breakdown, from unresolved conflicts in marriage. The person is just tired emotionally. And marital separation and divorce, infidelity, betrayal, all these things put people into depression. Unforgiveness, resentment. Unforgiveness is another area that people find themselves a lot of, that leads to depression. How could this person do this to me? We're not able to move on from that pain, that hurt. Unforgiveness is one big. And then when someone is in a narcissistic marriage or going through that experience, it also has the capability to put someone there. Rejection, and like I said, relationship issues, unrealistic expectations of each other in marriage. When people come, we expect each other to be perfect, and when you don't have that perfect person, then over time you fall into that. And loneliness, earlier in the week, the meeting that I was referring to earlier, someone talked about loneliness in a very touching way. That because of so much betrayal, because of so much negative experiences that people have had, many people in the world are now lonely. Like the proportion, the rate of loneliness is growing by the day, because people are socially isolating from each other. And as we said earlier, other things like unhealthy habits and addictions like sexual addictions can leave people feeling, you know, unclean. And after a while, you just find yourself like pornography, sexual perversions. All these things predispose people to depression in marriage and family dynamics. Sexual dysfunction, a man who consistently has either premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction, and for the woman, persistently failed orgasms can put people in states of depression. And then the burden of unbalanced strengths and roles, like we talked in the last call. Marriage is for two people. When one person consistently carries the burden, um, it becomes tiresome, and over time, the person with the weight can't slip into depression. And then work and financial related issues that pull people into depression. Are there any other reasons that we may not have covered here that you have experienced or that you've seen others experience that you want to put in the chat for us on reasons why people, problems. Mhm. Other reasons, yes, okay. The impact, of course, increased conflict, negative impact on parenting, stress, isolation, and strain on everything that the family has. As we begin to wind down, what did you do when you had depression? Can some people put a few strategies that they implemented that pulled them out of depression in the chat? And if you have questions, please feel free to put in the chat. Okay. As you are putting other strategies that you implemented in the chat, some practical strategies here. One, acknowledge and validate the reality that you have. As I go to talk about the strategies, sorry, I wanted to mention something. When you are in the person is in depression, the things that you want to do are really the things you should stop doing. But that's the comfortable place for the person to stay. Why is it like this? Remember also that when we talk, the description of depression is very, very important. It impacts the way you think, feel, and act. The more that the person begins to stay and not use the parts of their body. Remember, when you are depressed, you don't want to do anything. You just want to lie down. You don't even want to take care of yourself. Your level of activity is reduced. Your brain translates that to be you need less energy. So your brain is also going to release less and less energy to you. You see, so what you need to do really to get out of the depression are the things that you're not feeling like doing. But the more you don't feel like doing it, your brain translates that and helps you to. That's why we say create a new normal for you, because you just see that it's not because the person doesn't want to do it. The person, after a while, becomes unable to find the energy to help himself out of that state, because the brain has already conditioned you into that energy level, into that state. Your brain is no longer able to release as much dopamine, so you don't have pleasure. It's not releasing you have a lot more stress hormones. So your brain has a lot of inflammations going on. You feel all the weakness, all the signs that we mentioned. You have loss of appetite because that's what your brain is releasing. And after a while, you just find yourself there. And that's why we need to extend grace and compassion to those who are going through depression. Because depending on the stage that you are, your cognitive abilities have taken over, like your brain has taken over the functionality of how you are, and many things are already going in the body of the person. So acknowledge and validate your feelings and your current state. Know that what you're feeling is real. And even though you shouldn't stay there, acknowledge that, look at, I'm here and I need help. Then identify the triggers. What are those things that are causing you to what led you into this depression? Find the root cause. For instance, asking yourself questions like, what is my relationship with technology? There are times that people have like these persistent headaches, and over time it just stays. Do you know that something as simple as not sleeping in the same room with your phones can take away some of those headaches that you have persistently for like through the night and through the day? Because there are rays from this technology, these phones that we have, but we keep staying on them. The first thing you see is your phone. When you sleep, you wake up in the night, it's your phone, then your laptop, then it's TikTok, then it's Instagram. See, then you go to work and the stimulation just continues. So find what the triggers are, and remove and be bold enough to start confronting them. And then break break the circle by reframe the global problems that you think that you have. For instance, no, that's not the end of your life. You are not you are not as terrible as you're not a failure. And nobody wants you out of this world. You know, frame those problems, those large problems that you think it's the end of the world for you. Find ways. Remember, we said you may not be able to do it yourself. So getting help and pull yourself, come out from the thinking traps and begin to take care of yourself. Because when people are in depression, they neglect themselves, they neglect self-care. You're not interested. And like we said, when you remain in that circle, it just continues, right? So you need to break the circle that keeps the depression perpetuated. Get help. Reach out for medical attention, reach out to therapists, counselors, mental health professionals that can help you, and reach out spiritually as well. Get help and intentionally build systems around you that can pull you out of the depression. If over 80% of depression related issues come from relationship breakdown, then the solution is a lot also in relationship, except where we have like the medical conditions, and some of the medical conditions that even lead to depression started first with a relationship issue, which is where we try to focus a lot the lifestyle issues that lead us into issues in our marriage and issues physically all around our lives. So the relationships, our support structure is very, very important. Finding those accountability systems that help you to come out of depression. And then life skills are very important. Healthy habits, the digitally detox, set healthy boundaries, know how to solve the problems, financial. When you know how to manage your finances well, you know, the things you need, the skills you need to keep you out of those things that easily become a trigger for you to fall into depression. Why not build the skills and build healthy habits? Know when to say no. Seeking to please the entire world is part of the reason why some people find themselves in depression. And then, emotional intelligence and emotional regulation is a core skill that can keep you out of depression, helping you to build resilience, helping you to build like healthy boundaries around yourself, and knowing how to choose healthy emotions. One of the things that we teach when we are working with people that have depression is to audit your thoughts, to be able to, as a person, audit remove your thoughts from yourself and put the thoughts in front of you and say, this thought, why are you here? Why am I having these thoughts? Where do you come from? What's the root and what do I do with you? Like taking your thoughts and making your thoughts to be an external event that you audit, that you interact with and can decide with. But if you're not able to regulate your emotions, then you cannot have those kind of experiences. So building skills is important. So treatment options, there are medical options. And one of the options that I'll just highlight here is the support group that we are organizing for like 12 people who have depression and would like to be in an environment where people understand what you're going through, and will work with you over 6 weeks. And together, remember, one of the most important things in getting free from depression is you. You are a very core factor in coming out of depression. So If you're interested, our team will put the link to indicate your interest in the chat box. You feel free to connect. But when we hit 12, we will put others in a subsequent group. We're only taking 12 people because of sensitivity. And it's all online. You don't have there's no physical meetings. So depending on the level, extent of the depression, the various options are on the screen will be used for treatment. So we stay within our time. What does God's word say? Does God have anything to say about depression? Two things I'll just highlight from the Bible passages on the screen. You know, Jesus was saying, "The Spirit of God is upon me because He has anointed me to preach good tidings."
You just came now. We are 50.
Help us with the voice. Thank you. To heal the brokenhearted and to proclaim liberty to captives, to open prisons to those who are bound, to give beauty for ashes, oil of joy for mourning, a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. That sounds like depression. So yes, God cares about it, and He has made provisions for us to get free in His word. The spirit of heaviness, that is depression. The second thing I'll just highlight here, while God cares and He loves us, the Bible says in Revelation 3:20, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If you open the door, I will come in." God has given us the will. Remember, we said that depression affects the mind, the body, and the spirit, but you have a will. If we open the door, God is not going to barge into our hearts. This is Him saying to us, "I will not barge into your life." So depression also does not need to barge into our lives. We have a part to play in saying, "No, you will not come in." The Bible says, "Guard your heart with all diligence," because out of that heart will come all the issues of life, including depression, if you allow it. So we have a role to play in not allowing depression to come into our lives. What spiritual tools are available? Prayer and scripture. In prayer, we can pour our hearts to God and receive His healing. We can express all the pain. We can let them go in the place of prayer, and God's word can guide us to come out of depression. Whatever you go through, my pastor will always say, don't let your joy go. If anything that has the capacity to take your joy has the capacity to keep you in depression, because joy is the opposite of the cognitive distortion that we talked about, right? Instead of staying in the negative, joy can begin to pull you out. And gratitude. Every day, just waking up to look at the things that are working for you instead of focusing on just the negative, can bring you out of depression. And as we said, forgiveness is a key thing in depression. And finally, just allowing God's love to flow through you, allowing God, knowing that God loves you and that you're enough. You don't need to prove to anybody your existence in life, and God can answer all the existential questions that we have and give your life a meaning, give you purpose. Many times we are seeking love from everywhere else. Nobody, not one person, particularly in marriage. The wife is expecting that the husband will fill her love tank, but that love tank can only be filled by God. And it's the same thing for the men as well. Remember, depression is war, but you have a choice whether you will win or you will lose against depression. And the choice is ours. We can't decide if we lose or we win against depression by taking steps today, by not staying in the place of depression, by asking for help. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to reach out for help, but just don't keep quiet and die in depression. Thank you so much, everybody. If there are questions, we'll take questions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm just reading the things in the chat. Yes, support from family and friends. Yes. Yeah. All those things that help us come out. Okay. So please, if you'd like to be in a part of the support group, please click the link that the team has put, and then you will receive information about how to, and then we'll reach out to you on when the support group will start. I don't see any questions for today. Thank you all so much for joining the call. I hope that it it helped you in any way to come out of depression. You're not, remember what we said, coming out of depression. I'm trying to find coming out of depression is not a one day, it's not a one day event, right? It takes time. So you need to be patient with yourself and to plan, right? Or I think I need to stop sharing. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining the call today. We wish you a very beautiful rest of your Valentine celebration, and remember to just breathe. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank
God
you.
bless you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.